The poetry of the Ottoman Empire, or Ottoman Divan poetry, is fairly little known outside modern Turkey, which forms the heartland of what was once the Ottoman Empire. It is, however, a rich and ancient poetic tradition that lasted for nearly 700 years, and one whose influence can still, to some extent, be felt in the modern Turkish poetic tradition. Even in modern Turkey, however, Ottoman Divan poetry is a highly specialist subject. Much of this has to do with the fact that Divan poetry is written in Ottoman Turkish, which was written using a variant of the Arabic script and contained vast amounts of foreign Arabic and Persian words, and is as vastly different from the modern Turkish language of today as it was from the standard spoken Turkish of its own day. History. The Ottoman Divan poetry tradition embraced the influence of the Persian and, to a lesser extent, Arabic literatures. As far back as the pre-Ottoman Seljuk period in the late 11th to early 14th centuries CE, this influence was already being felt. The Seljuks conducted their official business in the Persian language, rather than in Turkish, and the poetry of the Seljuk court was highly inflected with Persian. When the Ottoman Empire arose in northwestern Anatolia, it continued this tradition. The most common poetic forms of the Ottoman court, for instance, were derived either directly from the Persian literary tradition, or indirectly through Persian from the Arabic. However, the decision to adopt these poetic forms wholesale led to two important further consequences. The poetic meters of Persian poetry were adopted. Persian and Arabic-based words were brought into the Turkish language in great numbers. As Turkish words rarely worked well within the system of Persian poetic meter, out of this confluence of choices, the Ottoman Turkish language, which was always highly distinct from Standard Turkish, was effectively born. This style of writing under Persian and Arabic influence came to be known as Divan literature, as Divan was the Ottoman Turkish word referring to the collected works of a poet, beginning with the Tanzimat period of Ottoman history and continuing until the dissolution of the empire in the early 20th century. The Divan poetic tradition steadily dwindled, and more influence from both Turkish folk literature and European literature began to make itself felt. Divan, Mesnevi. Mesnevi in literary term, rhyming couplets of profound spiritual meaning, is style developed in Persian poetry which Nizami Ganjavi and Jami are the famous poets of type. In Turkish literature, first Mesnevi was Yusuf Has Hacib's Kutadgubaylig, generally social concepts, Ferdowsi's Shahnama, Fuzili's Layla il-Meknanu's military events. Educational concepts such as Yusuf Nabi's Hayriya are related to religion or philosophy such as Mevlana's Masnavi is covered. A peculiarity of the Masnavi of the Ottoman period is that they almost always possess, beneath the literal meaning, a subtle spiritual signification. Many poems of Mesnevi of Mevlana and the Divan of Asik Pasha are examples of confessedly religious, moral, or mystic, but a much larger number are allegorical. To this latter class belong almost all the long romantic Mesnevis of the Persian and mid-Ottoman poets. In the stories of the loves of Layla and Meknan, Yusuf and Zulika, Khusrev and Shavan, Suleiman and Ebzil, and 100 of like kind can see pictured, if we look beneath the surface, the soul of man for God, or the yearning of the human heart after heavenly light and wisdom. There is not a character introduced into those romances but represents the passion, not an incident, but has some spiritual meaning. In the history of Iskandar, or Alexander, we watch the noble human soul in its struggles against the powers of this world and, when aided by God and guided by the heavenly wisdom of righteous teachers, its ultimate victory over every earthly passion. and its attainment of that point of divine serenity whence he can look calmly down on all sublunary things. Qaside is generally about God, religious government leaders and the values. Most famous poets are Ahmed Parsa, Nekati, Aki, Nedik, most importantly Nafi, terminology, Tevhid, about the unity of God, Munakat, prayer to God, Naat, about religious leaders and the Prophet, Metier, about the Sultan and government leaders, Nesabitesbib, nature and environment descriptions, Girizga, prelude to the topic, Fariya, praising the poet himself, Doak, prayer and well-wishing for the subject of the poem.